Today I'm talking with Brigit Blote. Brigit has just a great story to share with us today. It talks about her time in college, really kind of going after a degree in sustainability, to kind of a life-changing trip to Central America, to really the genesis of her founding a company called Formero, and really looking at integrating sustainability and some of the things that she found and saw lifestyle in Central America. This episode is really filled with a lot of humility, a lot of honesty, a lot of emotion, and then just a bunch of lessons learned from Brigit. And so I'm super excited to share this with you, and I hope you enjoy it as well. Okay, welcome to the new podcast of Wildfire Tales. Today I'm super excited to talk with Brigit. Brigit's got a great story about her startup and kind of where she is in the journey. And so welcome to the podcast, Brigit.
Thank you for having me, Todd. I'm super excited to be here.
Well, good. Well, why don't you tell me a little bit about your company, and then maybe start telling me a little bit about your kind of entrepreneurial journey from like founding to kind of present day.
Yeah. So Formero, we're a tech startup that is driven to making thrifting simple. So the purchasing of secondhand clothing, it's a pretty fragmented, not super enjoyable experience right now, and we're just looking to make it simple. I started off as a student at the University of South Dakota. I was studying medical biology, of all things. I had these aspirations of wanting to definitely be in medicine. But kind of at the same time of the pandemic hitting, I started to realize I don't know if healthcare is technically the way that I want to go into more science-based, a more science-based career, I should say, of some sort. And that's kind of when I started to realize, okay, I really like the concept of sustainability, mostly like the excitement behind how we can make positive change, how that relates to impact. And on a trip when I was studying abroad, kind of figuring out whether or not this is something I wanted to switch my major to, is when the idea of this business, Formero, came to be. So I definitely didn't start off wanting to be an entrepreneur. I come from a very entrepreneurial family, and I was definitely the kid who was like doing the pop-up lemonade stands on the side of the road. So I guess you could kind of maybe foresee it from the very beginning. But yeah, I didn't necessarily have the most like sound basis of wanting to be an entrepreneur from the start.
Let's go back to like your semester abroad in college, because I think that's interesting. I think it takes you to leave the country to understand how our culture is different. And so, you talk about sustainability, and then is your semester abroad in Costa Rica and how that kind of changed your thought process. You were starting to get interested in sustainability. I would think that going to Costa Rica, they have a very different kind of consumer culture. And so when you kind of look at that, where compared to where you grew up in the United States, that probably started to create some differences in the way you saw the world. And then maybe this kind of idea of your startup and thrifting and reusable it kind of leads towards it.
Yes. So on the study abroad in the summer semester, so first and foremost, it was a very interesting program. It was kind of based around the concept of, okay, how can we combine impact with business? And what the curriculum was about was how can this next generation of leaders have businesses that are mission-driven, kind of like nonprofits, but how can they be profitable and also very scalable? So that was kind of what we were studying in this course. And the location of the course, yes, was super interesting too, because first and foremost, like the location was in this very mountainous town of Costa Rica. It was a very rural community, and we stayed with host families. So I was in a 2-bedroom house. There were 6 of us living there. Wow. We had arroz y frijoles, like rice and beans, every meal, breakfast, lunch, and dinner for an entire semester. And there was something, yes, very profound about the culture and how wonderful the people were and how little they needed in order to really enjoy life. And I found that very inspiring. But in addition to that, being in this mountainous community, the bus that we were taking from the airport in order to get up into the mountains could only make it so far on the journey before the mountain terrain just got too much.
Oh, really?
Got to be too much. So we had to backpack the rest of the trip. Yeah. And anyway, because of that, like for the whole semester, people are wearing the clothes that they can carry on their back. So I'm starting to see my classmates in this program wear the same outfits like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, washing them Tuesday, Thursday. Yep. And because of that, there was this girl in my class who Monday, Wednesday, Friday, she was showing up in this white t-shirt that had forget-me-not flowers on it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's my older sister's favorite flower, and it kind of just reminded me of home. I loved the shirt. So I would tell her all the time, Carter, I love your shirt. I love your shirt. By the end of the trip, she was kind of challenging me, like, Brigit, you need to buy this shirt. Like, I've heard it. I'm not going to give you mine. Like, you're going to get this shirt. But in light of the course and what we were studying, we were really diving into fashion, and the difficulties within the industry. It's sweatshops are very real today. Waste, water waste. The amount of consumption that we're using and not reusing is pretty, it's disheartening. And so in light of that conversation, she said, I'm challenging you to thrift. Like, we talked a lot about the circular economy, how there's so much potential, so much, there's so much there that's kind of untapped. And she said, Brigit, yeah, I encourage you to thrift this shirt. Like, that's my challenge for you when you get back to the US. And I said, sure, like, challenge accepted. So I got back to the United States. I'm going into thrift shops in Rapid City, scouring for this shirt, not finding it anywhere. So then I took to Google and I was like, okay, forget-me-not flower t-shirt, used, secondhand, thrifted. I'm trying to come up with these synonyms to describe what I'm looking for. And after a while, I'm starting to find it on Poshmark, ThredUp, Depop, like these big either like IPO'd thrift shops.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm also starting to find it on, a little thrift shop from Tennessee, or, a mid-sized thrift shop from like the East Coast. So I'm finding this shirt in a lot of different like price points, different qualities, different shipping costs, different sizes. And I slowly started narrowing them down until I found like the perfect one for me to purchase. And I kind of just thought to myself at that point in time, like, wow, this industry is huge. Secondhand is. It's definitely a step in the right direction in terms of kind of diving into that circular economy. However, it's so fragmented. Like, it took me 3.5 hours to find this shirt that I wanted to purchase. Like, what if you could just type in the clothing item that you're looking for and we could locate it within a matter of seconds? So that was kind of how the very idea of Fomento started. The name of the company also comes from that, Forget-Me-Not Flowered T-shirt. We, when you submit an app to the App Store, it can only be so long. Also, Forget-Me-Not was definitely trademarked. So we took the first two letters and Forget-Me-Not and then put them together, and that's Fomento.
Oh, cool.
So the whole concept, again, is just to like simplify the secondhand shopping experience.
What's interesting about this, and I think entrepreneurs need to look for opportunities like this, is you saw friction and this highly fragmented environment that created opportunity, right? And so because it was difficult to do, there's got to be an easier way to do it. And that's really the foundation of your business. So
yes, that's the goal. Yeah, it's to make fragmentation not as big of a problem.
Yeah. And so talk to me, like, so now you've got you hopefully got the t-shirt, so that's good. And then now how do you take that? Yep. How did you go from that concept to doing business plan competitions and really proving that actually there's a business here?
Yes. That's a great question. It's the whole concept of like, how do you come from idea to product, or how do you come from idea to what's the next step? And for me, again, like, my background is not in business and it's not in tech. And so, like, right here, I think is a very pivotal point in most people's potential entrepreneur career. You have an idea, you see a problem, you kind of have an idea for a solution to that problem, but you stop. Like, you maybe don't think you're qualified to offer the solution to the public, and not even to the public, but maybe to like your friends and family. Like, you just, I don't know if you just don't feel qualified or like what that bridge is, but it's definitely there. And I heard this quote the other day. It was talking about how if every good idea that ever, was first formed in someone's mind actually came to be, if it entered the world in some capacity, like, what would our world look like today? Like, how creative and how beautiful would it be, like, if those ideas actually came into reality? And I remember the moment where I thought this could be cool. And the first person that I called was my academic advisor. She was the one who encouraged me to go on this trip and to really figure out if this is something that I wanted to study. And I called her up on the phone and I said, hey, Sarah, like, this is an idea that I had. It sounds kind of crazy. I know I'm totally not qualified to be doing this, but is it something that you think I should look into? And I think that first person that you call when you have an idea is really like very critical to like the whole story. Like it could almost make me
Yeah.
tear up, to be honest, because um, it's so funny. She was like, yeah, you could do this. Like, I think you should go for it. And which is crazy, right? Like on paper, that makes no sense. Like I should not be the one to go for it. But she thought I should. So, wow, that made me want to cry there for a second. But yeah, I because of her like initial belief, like, yeah, you should look into this a little bit more. I did. And I started emailing companies in South Dakota that, were even remotely related to tech. And I asked like, hey, I have this idea. Is it even possible? Is it even possible? I know literally nothing about technology, but I'm curious if there's a way we could somehow pull in inventory from all these big thrift shops and bring it to one location. And I remember getting some emails back that were like, yeah, I think just like using like an API or something, you could tap in. I didn't know what those words meant. I had no
Yeah.
idea back then. But it was like that next step. Okay, it is possible. So then what after that? And that's kind of at the same time that I was going back to school. Again, COVID at this time was just about to hit. And I saw that the Holt Prize, this global accelerator competition, had just launched their yearly prompt. And it just so happened to be that this year's prompt was to create a business that positively impacts the planet.
Well,
And that's when I kind of thought, okay, maybe this is something I could pitch for this competition. If that's the case, I need to have two teammates, and I need someone who can really sell, and I need someone who can like mock up the designs for this app. Like, who's the best designer I know, and who is the best like pitcher, salesy person I know. And that's how I found my teammates. And then we kind of started pitching it and slowly moving up the ranks, trying to figure out how we could monetize. Again, we didn't know, but we just hit Google and asked around, and a lot of professors were really willing to help us, even if it wasn't our major. And as we slowly started moving up the ranks of this competition, that's when we ended up winning the United States regional round on this just simple idea. We had no product at the time, just a business model and some scrappy wireframes. And yeah, we ended up beating out Harvard, MIT, Duke, and a couple other universities to win that United States regional round. Again, with just this crazy idea. And yeah, that was kind of how the product. It wasn't built yet, obviously, but it was like another step after another step in the right direction to trying to see if this was actually a viable business.
sure. And so then basically from there, you went to the national competition. Is that like you got qualified because you won the United States, then you got to go to the international version of it?
Exactly. Yep. So they picked 30 teams from across the globe to go to this like actual accelerator. And so we were the representatives of the United States. And yeah, it was an amazing opportunity because we got to meet people from all over the world. At this time, COVID absolutely was hit, so it was all remote. But it was really cool to be able to connect with people. Some of our competitors at that time are now some of my closest friends. So it was really an amazing experience. We ended up being one of the recipients at the end of the seed capital. So that was kind of the first amount of funding that we ever got was through that accelerator, and making it, all the way to the end.
So then at this point, do you have an app, or like how did you go from like winning these competitions to, like basically having an app and then raising angel capital?
Yeah, so as you can imagine, at that time, like we did not have a technical co-founder, which has from the very beginning been like a real weakness of ours. We've since found ways to really solve that problem, but at the beginning, that was always a problem that we had. But we're a pretty scrappy team. So we said, you know what? We don't have an app. We know what the vision of this app looks like. We don't have the actual product, but we can still get customers. So we were like taking orders, if you will, of what people were looking for. So just like I was looking for that Forget Me Not flower t-shirt, we were asking people like, what are you looking for? Like, what do you want to thrift? We'll find it for you. So rather than a simple technology being able to do that, we just manually were doing it. We were trying to get as many like of these orders as we possibly could. We'd send them all the links to the best options. And we were really just like scrapping it. But we got customers that way.
Yeah.
And we were able to build enough traction at that point to win. I mean, I still to this day don't know how we possibly convinced them that we were qualified to be doing this, but I mean, we just found a way to find customers and to really prove that there's like product market fit there, that
Sure.
people want to use our product. So yeah, we still don't have an app when we win this competition, and afterwards, that's kind of when I met with a couple angel investors out of Sioux Falls, near where we went to school.
Yep.
And I met with Matt Paulson down there, and he asked if I wanted to pitch to the Falls Angels. And so we ended up raising a little bit extra capital to really get this thing off the ground and going. And I mean, when we pitched to them, we still didn't have a product. We were just pitching off of like a business model and the traction that we had gained from just like hustling these customers manually. So yeah, we raised 150K from the Falls Angels and then a couple other angels and friends and family in the area. So yeah, we got to this point where we had about 350K in capital and still no product. So that's kind of when we really had to hit the ground running, figuring out how are we going to build this thing so we don't have to like be spending all waking hours of the day like trying to figure out how to do this manually. Like how can we scale this?
So then you built the app. You basically either figured it out or you got some help to do it. How did that happen?
Yes. So pretty much this is probably one of the biggest, this is one of our first like failures as a team, I would say, and it was a pretty painful one. We found this outsourced development company to work with. We got, introduced to them from the accelerator that we had done, and I didn't know very much about tech. Like I told you, I didn't even know what an API was when we first started.
Yeah.
I was so focused on like the business plan and figuring out how we could actually get customers and do they want our product, things like that. And by not having a CTO, we didn't have someone really focusing on the actual product. So even when we won, I hardly knew like technical jargon. I knew what we wanted to build. I didn't really know what steps we had to take to get there. So we went with this development company and without really vetting their skills, knowing what they were capable of. And it was pretty much a very painful 9 months. It was not super expensive. I'm very grateful for that. I mean, it's still money that we absolutely wasted, but we started building with them, problem after problem, like red flag after red flag, to the point where we got to about 9 months in, the product was so horrible. Nobody wanted to use it. It did not like bring any justice to the vision that we had. They couldn't quite figure out how to scrape the data from different, thrift shops that we had already partnered with. There was so many issues, and that's, about 9 months in, it took me that long to realize like this is not the company to be working with. This is not the solution. This is not scalable. Exactly. I'm kind of embarrassed to admit that it took that long to realize that, but that's just the truth.
Yep.
And yeah.
But what did you learn out of that? What did you learn out of it, though? What did you learn from that? Like you say, yeah, I know, but like, is there specifics? Like, is it from a technical skill set? Is it from a more documentation about what you were looking for? Because I always think like when you work with somebody outsourced in any regard, you have to be super clear about what you want. Because it's, if it's something that's in your head and it's not documented, like it's hard to fault the developer for not interpreting and being a mind reader.
Totally. Oh, we learned so much. I'd say the first thing that we learned was that you can't communicate what you want if you don't know how to communicate what you want. I personally, since we didn't have a CTO, did not know enough about the terminology and the processes of building something like this enough to be able to explain what I wanted. And on the contrary, they also weren't able to communicate in maybe more layman's terms what they were building or what issues they were having. So there was it's like we were speaking different languages. And I I never wanted to feel like that again. So even if, when we did bring on a CTO, I said I never want to feel like this again. I want to understand 100% what's going on with this product that we're building.
Yeah.
So that's when I really started to take to like coding for dummies. I read that book like start to finish. I started doing boot camps and like really trying to like dive in on, okay, I might not be the one to build this product. Like I'm not our CTO, and I know I won't have the capabilities to be able to do that, but I want to be able to understand everything to the best of my knowledge. So I really took to just trying to figure out more about tech, and that has been one of the best things to serve us moving forward, I would say. In addition to that, I learned about if there's so much, if things aren't working out, they always say to fail fast, right? Fail hard. What's the point of like keep trying? At what point do you realize you need to keep trying, and at what point do you realize it needs to stop and you need to try something new?
Yeah.
I think that was a big learning lesson for us in terms of how do we figure that out moving forward, because it's always going to continue to happen. There's always going to be points where like, do we keep putting money into this?
Yeah.
Do we try and spice some things up, or do we just like halt that and pivot? So that was kind of a big learning lesson for us as well. Another learning lesson for us was just figuring out how we always want to own our own source code. We don't want people to ever, have control over it. We have control over everything that we own, everything that's being built. The documentation is lined up, it's clean, it's concise. So on the technical side, we also figured out a lot of things in terms of ownership and just making sure everything we build moving forward is in our control.
Yours. Yeah, exactly. Well, that's good. I mean, that's a huge piece though, right? Like, I mean, I think we see a lot of entrepreneurs that are product people, which you probably put yourself in that category to start with, and then understanding the technical aspects of it and saying, I have a vision in my head of what it's supposed to look like, but understanding all the underpinnings of it, like, I just don't know. And so there are, as you well know, there's a bunch of trade-offs to making those things happen. And so the more you can educate yourself on whether it's the tools or the trade-offs or the constraints or scalability, like the better off you're going to be able to make technical decisions to get your product to market. So, I mean, I give you props because teaching yourself any sort of coding basics is not always easy. And, it sounds like you talk to experts, you listen to podcasts, you connected with, you found a technical lead that maybe could give you some advisement. Those are all things that you said, I realize I have a hole in my domain expertise. How do I basically put people around that so that it's not going to take the ship down?
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, good for you. So now you got an app after all of that, and now you're getting some traction. I think I don't know how current some of this is, but you've probably got 12,000 downloads of it. You've got 45 retail partners on your platform. Talk to me a little bit about like, how do you get everybody to start using the product? How, once you get a download, like what's the way to like turn that into actual transactions and revenue?
That is a great question, Todd. Something we're learning in real time, for sure.
Yes.
So I'll just even explain how we've gotten some of our users so far.
Okay.
We launched the app in beta, and it was a disaster still. I mean, it worked, okay? It worked, but it had so many bugs. It was, looking back on it, it's a little embarrassing, but also very hopeful. Like, look how far we've come since we first pushed this out. Yeah, it's on our Notion like headquarters page where everyone has access to it, and you can check very team related stuff. We have a picture of the first version of the app that people can look at daily. What our first branding looked like. What our first customers were saying. We have that, and then we compare it. Right next to it is a picture of what things look like today, because I think so many times it's hard to see the progress that you're making when your nose is in it every single day. But when you can compare it to what you looked like a year ago or even 6 months ago, there's so much hope to be had there. And I think a lot of times when you're running a startup, you just need to see hope. When you're pitching, you just need to hear someone who likes your idea. When you're building, you just need to hear a few customers think this is awesome. So we're really big on just like remembering where we came from and finding hope from that. But anyway, at the beginning, product, it worked, but it had some issues. And as we've as we scaled, I think it was probably 2 or 3 months in, we had about 500 users. We were really just trying to get data. What features are they using? What are they not using? What do we need to make better because it seems to be a hot feature? What things, do we need to just cut out of the picture? And I posted this TikTok. It took me probably a minute to record it. I just wanted to see, like, I wonder what people think about this feature. I'm trying to get
Yep.
creative. Where's our target
Yep.
market? Let's see if anybody bites here.
Sure.
Recorded this TikTok, and the first night, after I posted it, I think maybe it got 100 views, maybe 1 or 2 comments. Nothing crazy. The second night, though, the algorithm really picked it up, and it went viral. And it was all about this feature of like thrift what influencers are wearing, which was a new feature that we did not even pitch, I think, with the whole prize. It was something we were trying to see if people liked.
Yeah.
The whole idea of it is you can scroll very similarly to Pinterest.
Mhm.
You can see what influencers are wearing, and we have an AI that will scan that image and connect you to where you can find those products on online thrift shops. So that was the concept. I was trying to see, does anyone like this? That was one of the ways we were trying to get user data or customer data. Anyway, it really blew up. We got about 2,000 downloads that night.
Wow.
And learned very quickly that our infrastructure could not handle that. That was a great and painful learning lesson as well. I mean,
Yeah.
we had uh, our developer was over on vacation, I think in London, and it was like the middle of the night his time, but he got up and was like, "Okay, I'm working on it." We had our verification codes, so you sign up for something, you get an email verification, has the
Mhm.
numbers you input. That, I guess we were on the free version, of course, and it had a maximum capacity of like 500 emails every 24 hours. And so we
You
hit
blew
that
through
within a
it.
matter of,
Yeah.
I think, yeah, we blew through it. So no one was getting verification codes. We had all these ghost users who were, messaging us, "Hey, I can't get in. Hey, I can't get in. Can you help me?" Immediately, our sales girl, my co-founder Peyton, she was like, "Okay, pipeline time." Like, she was handling all of these emails and messages coming in on TikTok about how people were stuck. I was working with our developer, being like, "When can we get this up and running? Let's up this package. How do we figure out how to isolate these users who are like ghost users now and make them profiles?" Ashlyn, my other co-founder who's in design, was working on how we can, message all these people via social media and make sure they're taken care of. It was a crazy week, to be
Sounds
honest.
like
We learned a lot in that week. We didn't sleep at all during that week. But it was also really fun looking back on chaos and how like our team really came together to just like figure out the problem. And I think ultimately I kind of talked about like that hopefulness. Um, there is something so cool about building a product that was once just an idea and people like it. It hearing how much feedback people were talking about, how wow, this is going to be the next big thing. This is the secondhand Pinterest. Like Fomeno is the secondhand Pinterest. I
yeah.
was seeing all those comments come in on that TikTok, and I was just thinking, this is crazy. Like,
That
I
is
cannot
crazy.
believe that this is a moment we're having right now. And yeah. Uh, anyway, I think I'm digressing a little bit, but that was just a moment that we had where, the team really came together. The product was, still a mess, but there was hope there. People were seeing what we were doing. We were getting all this data about like what really needs to get fixed. How can we, improve upon some of these features, and then, just keep improving as a product and as a company.
Yeah, I think one of the things that you kind of said in there that I think is really important is, and you talk about like maybe like the first version to where you are today. I think in startups, well, and just in general in life, I think we celebrate the thing, or not even celebrate. We focus on the things we need to do better, not the things that we've done well. And I think in startups, you need to have some balance to that because you've come so far. But like you are constantly looking at the next set of things that need to be done, and you're like kind of beating yourself up, going, "I just need to get this, and I need to get this, and I need to get this." And I think taking that time out to say, "Are we always better than we were 30 days ago, 60 days ago, 6 months ago?" Because I do think like you're like, "Oh yeah, I'm way better. Yeah, that's good."
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of fun we do this practice where it's like, okay, where are we at? Okay, here's where we're at today. It's a combination of what are the things we're doing well? What are the things maybe that, we're not doing so well. Where are we at? Let's take an audit. Where do we want to be? Like next month, where do we want to be? 5 years, where do we want to be? It can be a very like different time spectrum.
Sure.
But where do we want to be? You set the time spectrum for whatever, goals you're trying to hit. So in a month, where do we want to be? Okay, what's the gap between where we're at, where we want to be? It's very simple, but it's nice to look at it all like that in order to make a game plan, because when you're saying where are we at, you're also looking at, again, like you said, Todd, like what are the things we've been doing well? Like we have an app on the App Store. We have this going on. We have 12,000 users. We have this many purchases this month. Like that's where we're at. But then you can also, look off into the future and say, okay, where do we want to be? Let's bridge that gap.
Yeah, that's cool.
But yeah, I totally agree with you.
Okay, let's pivot maybe a little bit to mentorship. I think this. You haven't done this alone. You talked about kind of maybe a professor that helped you kind of guide to even give you the confidence to say, I'm going to go do this. There's probably lots of people along the way that have been helping you, nurturing you, giving you ideas, connecting you with you. And I think this mentor network that we kind of talk about, I think we don't do this alone as entrepreneurs. It's got to be people that have helped you. And so I look at people in my career, they've kind of run the gamut. There's people that I've had early in my career versus mid in my career, later in my career. They're not always the same people, but they play a pretty critical role. And so for you, do you have kind of that mentor network? And has it been a similar experience for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So at the beginning, when we were in college, our mentor network, kind of like you just said, is different than it is now. I mean, we were all students. We had this idea, and our faculty and our professors were very much like, yeah, let's help you do this. The community of Vermilion at large, when they learned that we had won this global competition and we needed funding, I mean, someone started us a GoFundMe page. Like, how can we help these girls like
That's awesome.
get off the ground and get the resources they need? Like, that was amazing. And I think part of it was our advisors who had helped like set that up. But yeah, we had an awesome community back then, and we didn't really know anything, so people were really, really helpful in getting us the basics. Anyway, as we transitioned post accelerator or post school, we entered that accelerator, and that came with a whole community of mentors as well. And they really helped us mentor through like how do you win this competition? Like that season of life was a little bit different. We needed different mentors in order to reach that goal, and they really, really helped us through that. There was definitely a gap in mentorship. And it's been the times when we've struggled the most as a company and have just like hit so many trials that we really struggled to get through, where we didn't have super strong mentorship in the areas that we needed. And, I actually was reflecting on that a couple of weeks ago, as I've really found some mentors in my life who I really value our relationship. I was trying to think of like, where were they? Like, why? I wish I would have known these people when I was going through, especially the problem I'm talking about is like that 9 months of development. We didn't have like a great technical mentor that we reached out to very often, and it's very noticeable. So yeah, mentorship is so important, and I think, like you were saying, Todd, it's had its different phases. Some mentors are really pivotal at this time or this time. They offer different sorts of expertise, and it's interesting now too. We're fundraising. How there's been some amazing mentors in my life who have really helped me through this. And prior, most of my mentors were people very much in business or in sectors, but the biggest mentors right now in my life are other like founders of companies who have raised capital. And it's been amazing building that network of great advisors in my life, and trying to figure out ways like how can I keep them involved in the company long term, especially the ones that really stick out, who really believe in the mission and really offer some amazing ideas and skill sets. So that's something I'm still working on it in real time. There's a lot of gaps that I've been reflecting on recently of where I'd like to have a little bit more mentorship in, and things like that. So I don't have it down. I'm really trying to improve that part of my life right now. But I realized the biggest times when we have struggled was when we didn't have a lot of mentorship.
Yeah, I wouldn't beat yourself up. I think it's a work in progress all the time, right? I mean, I would say, I transitioned from leaving a corporate job and doing a job in Seattle, and I've had to kind of develop a network here, right? And so I want people that sharpen me, that give me, that challenge me, and so it's ongoing. I don't think it ever stops. It's just where phase your life in, and then what are the people that can be additive to helping you get to the next phase? So. Yeah, it's good. So let's keep talking on this. Like you kind of talked a little bit about how your mentorship network maybe is geared more towards founders that have actually raised money. You're in the middle of doing that. This is not the easiest economic climate to be raising capital. And so talk to me a little bit about that process, the learning, and maybe some of the things that you've kind of gleaned from this process as you're kind of going through the process of raising capital.
Yeah. Great question. So in the past, we have raised capital, right? And it honestly, it was very structured, and I don't think it was that normal. I mean, Matt Paulson was the one to reach out to me.
Yeah.
That doesn't really happen, especially in this economy. And I think moving into this next round was pretty naive. We had the support of the accelerator that gave us cash. It was very you do this, you outbeat these people, you get the funds. Yeah. And then Matt coming to me and the round finishing after was, it was just very different to the experiences I've had today. I don't think going into it, I realized how much rejection I was going to get. And it didn't necessarily dictate anything about the company. It just because you're getting no, it doesn't mean you're not building something that needs to be built. It just means you haven't found the right people to listen to your story and to pitch to. And maybe you have, and they just don't have money to deploy. There's so many factors going on in the fundraising scene that are just very interesting. So yeah, absolutely. I think when we started at the end of June, beginning of July, I was pretty, I thought the process would be a lot quicker and a lot easier than it actually is. And so I've learned a lot because of that. I'd say one of the biggest things, though, kind of back to what I was saying, is that you really can't judge throughout this process, or you cannot take personally no's or rejections. I think that's a really great lesson to take into any, any part of life.
Yep.
Is just because, you get really rejected or people don't like what you're building doesn't mean you're not onto something or the product isn't great. They might not understand you. It might not be an alignment of interests or missions. They might not have anything to actually offer you. There's so many factors that go into it. So, every no you get, I can't take them personally. I just have to try and grow from them or just move on to the next. That's been something that's been a very good life lesson, I think, for me to learn. That was a lot harder, a few months back, before I really came to that conclusion. Networking in this process means everything. I mean, it's so much, warm intros obviously are more impactful than just cold intros. But when you're fundraising, to have a founder intro you to one of their investors who have invested in them is one of the biggest things that can ever happen in terms of the likeliness that they want to book a call or are interested in your company. The most impactful intros that I've had have come from founders who have raised from investors. And then they've, introed me to people in their network. So that's been really huge in terms of outreach and getting, those first calls. But I'd say, networking, and then just reminding yourself that the things you're doing are good and that there's a lot of room to grow throughout the process of pitching, and, to really weed out the comments. If some comments are painful, but they're true, and some comments are painful, and they're just not true.
Yep.
And so I think it's been really interesting trying to dissect which ones are which ones we can grow from, and which ones I just kind of have to be okay, moving onto the next pitch.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. I think there's a couple things in there. One of them is this is way more time consuming than you think. This is always the case. I mean, your Matt experience is great, but I would say that doesn't happen 9 times out of 10. And then I think as you start to get to more managed funds, they're professionally managed, and you're asking for higher dollar amounts, the level of professionalism just goes up, right? So they're looking for a specific thing. And like you said, they may not be, they may have some domain expertise in an area that's not yours. They may have a thesis that's not aligned with their money that they're trying to capital deploy. They may not have capital at this point. So there's a whole bunch of things there. I think one of the things that's interesting, though, is if you hear no a lot, are there enough trends in the data that you got to go fix it? Right. And I think, I even talk about like Property Meld. I think they got a bunch of no's and then they basically went and fixed it. And so there was so much consistency in their no's and then not letting them off the hook to say no and just walk away. No, why? Right? Like, tell me exactly why you're doing this. And so it's painful to hear it, but I need to know it. And then all of a sudden I see 3 other people basically gave me something that's similar feedback. I should stop. I should go back, fix my business, and then come back. And so I don't know if you're starting to see any of that trending, but I think the no, if they're any good, they should give you the next level of detail to understand why.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. I mean, it's really interesting to even see towards the beginning when I was doing a lot of cold outreach to these investors, my quick blurb was like a long paragraph blurb, or like 2 paragraphs of,
Yeah.
hey, I'm looking for, this much, like this is like, no, Brigit, like the response rate of that certain, pitch that I was sending out to people was like 2%. I think people were responding. And when they did respond, it was just like, this isn't enough info, but it's also too much info. Like, I don't know. I obviously, my messaging was just like not good. So definitely even from the very beginning, we've changed our deck like 7 times, I think. Constantly improving. Looking back again on that first deck that I was sending, I was like, of course they said no, Brigit. Where was this? Where was that? Like, that looked horrible. The info there was so scattered. Like, get to the point. These people are looking at minimum like 10 pitches a day, maximum. Like, I've heard up to people reviewing over like 150 a day. So get to the point. Like, our deck, my pitch, everything has improved so much since the beginning. And, we have seen a lot of more interest, like much more recently. And I think a big part of that is like the company's still the same. I mean, we've been trying out new things and, like spicing up some of our ways of generating revenue. But ultimately, I think my communication has just improved a lot in terms of how I'm pitching this company and to who I'm pitching it to.
And maybe to dig in further than that, I think it's kind of this persona business, right? Where you need to understand your audience, right? And so the audience in a lot of those cases are finance people, or they start with finance. And so they're not operators, they're not entrepreneurs. And so they're looking for things because they pattern match across all of the proposals they've been looking for. And so you think yours is special, it's special, but they're looking at them in a very different way. And I think that's I've seen this quite a bit with entrepreneurs where it's like, we have to translate a little bit to know your audience and then repackage your data in a way that they can consume it very quickly and make some decisions.
Absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, even in the first ones, it was just very product-based pitching.
Yeah.
And you're so right, Todd. Like, the people I'm communicating with, they're going to ask me, like, why isn't your conversion rate on there? What's your,
Right.
talk to me more about, your churn rate. Like, there's all these things that are so easy to include. Like, we have the data, but I wasn't communicating effectively in order to really latch them in. So, yeah, I mean, absolutely. It really, it's all about the communication strategy and that you're speaking their language.
Yeah. You have been building this kind of in the Dakotas, and so that's kind of interesting. You don't hear a ton of startups coming out of our region right now. We've definitely hear some. We talked about Property Meld a little bit earlier. Obviously, North Dakota's got some ones, with Bushel, and I work with one called Thread that's doing pretty well. We're seeing more and more of this. What do you think some of the advantages and disadvantages of doing this in kind of the middle of the country versus the coasts?
That's a great question. I don't think I realized until I went to the coast a few weeks ago. I was pitching at the New York Venture Summit. I didn't really realize what the ecosystem differences were because I just hadn't been there, and that was pretty eye-opening to me. One, because the quantity of investors out there is obviously greater, but also the quantity of startups is also greater. So it was really interesting just seeing how, on every block, there's probably X amount of investors. And when you're in a very centralized location like this Venture Summit, where there's, over 250 investors, angel, pre-seed, seed stage, that you can just literally bump shoulders with and start talking about your company organically with, and have them just, see which ones within a matter of a few minutes who are excited about what you're doing, want another call. Like, just the location and the amount of people that are there and how easy it is to kind of just, find those right people, has been very interesting. Like, I'm not going to walk around, you know, the Dakotas and just boom, there's an investor, boom, there's another one, boom, there's another one
Right.
within a matter of seconds, and them get excited. Like, that's just not, as of right now, like the way
It's
that it
not our market,
is,
right?
for better. And yeah, exactly. That's not really what we offer the most. However, the thing that's very interesting, and I talk about this a lot. I've had so many investors when I jump on the call. One of the first questions they say is, "So where are you calling in from? Where are you calling in from?" And I say, "Oh, I'm from like the Dakotas, like North and South Dakota." And they'll say, "Oh, I've never met a startup from there. This is a first, like without a doubt." That's what I always get. Um, and I don't necessarily think that's a disadvantage. I mean, for investors who have very focus-based funds in certain areas, that I don't meet the criteria of, like, yeah, that's a disadvantage. But we also have a lot of the investors that we have here care about where we are, and they want to see startups succeed. They want more seats at the table, and they want them to be filled. And even with Matt, like, part of what I think is really cool is, like, yeah, he came to me. He said, "How can I help you, like, grow this business? Like, I want you guys to succeed. I want more startups here. I want more jobs here because of these startups." Like, it's amazing how people do come to you, or like the excitement travels.
Yep.
And like, even yesterday I was at Fargo at the Prairie Capital Summit. And people be like, "Oh my gosh, you're from Bismarck. Here's this founder. Oh, here's this guy who lives there." Like, the networking there is so powerful because there's not that many of us, and people want to see us to succeed, not just because it's a startup or anything, but like it can bring something to the community.
Hmm.
Whereas places like the coast, I don't know if they necessarily care about that. Like, there's already enough of them that, like, the mission is just like, can I make money off this startup? Or,
Yep.
yeah, ooh, that's trendy, that's fun, I want to be a part of it. But like, here it's so much more than that. And I, being from here, love that. And if anything, that's another reason why I should just like keep going with this and see what happens. Um, and I don't know, I love that aspect about it. It's just the fact that people here do want to see you succeed. They'll do the things that they can, because there's just a lot of benefits to it that are just more than making money. Um, and I think that's pretty awesome.
I do. I agree with you. And I think, we started this conversation even before we got to starting recording about, we're basically trying to community build, right? We're trying to diversify local economies.
Mhm.
We're trying to give options to young people about where they want to live and work. And I think there's a lot of places in the middle of the country where people want to live, but there's not enough opportunities. I have kids in college, and I think part of the things that I've been saying is, I would love them to have the opportunity. If they want to come back, they can. And it's not about having one job. It's about having a number of opportunities to create a career, right? And so you just don't go work for one company because that's the only one in town. You want the ability to continue to progress and grow, because there's lots of opportunities, and do it in the place you want to. And so I think that is the goal, and we all play kind of a small role in that here.
Mhm. I totally agree.
Yeah. So maybe subdividing this even further, it's like tech is notoriously male dominated, and I think that hasn't changed dramatically over probably the last 10 or 12 years. I think even in our portfolio with Wildfire, I think we probably have 30 or 40% of our candidates are women, which is great. And so talk to me a little bit about, just being a women entrepreneur in the region. And is it getting better? Are there things that we should be thinking about doing to make it easier? Is there more encouragement? I mean, there's lots of great ideas. There's lots of smart people that want to go do this. It's about making sure that they're set up for success. And I think it's hard enough being an entrepreneur in general. And so I'm just curious on your perspective on some of that.
Um, yeah, it's interesting. I think, so again, when I was in New York, I walked into this big convention center, and I would say there was probably 400 people there. I'd say maybe 25 to 50 of them were women. The rest
Okay.
were like middle-aged men.
Yeah.
And like of those women, I was definitely like the youngest. I was the youngest one there, and I was a woman, which is two kind of interesting things. Um, but the thing about it is like, yeah, those are the statistics. Like when I'm looking into this convention center, it's mostly like suits, like gray, blue,
Yeah.
black suits. Like that's
Yeah.
what I'm seeing with some pops of color of ladies like wearing dresses. Like that's what my visual was. But I don't feel like it was. I didn't feel any less like I belonged there.
Okay. That's good.
Um, and I think part of that was just because, yeah, I think like probably today there's a lot more funds that they really care about growing like women-led businesses.
Yep.
Or people maybe just like maybe they just take women in business more seriously. I'm not really sure. Like I never felt as though just because I looked different than like the average person there, or I was just younger, I wasn't taken as seriously.
Okay. That's good.
And I really appreciated that. Definitely. I think we're kind of starting to shift to this mentality that ultimately people want to invest in companies that they think are going to succeed,
Yeah.
and I don't know if they necessarily have as many biases about who that is. They just want to be a part of it, and if you can convince them then that company is you, then they're willing to
Great.
keep the conversation rolling. So that was just an interesting experience that I had. I get asked this question a lot, and I don't really know how to respond to it, to be honest. I think I don't have enough necessarily or I don't have enough experience um, feeling like the scene isn't great to really have an opinion about it. I don't know. I haven't experienced too much. I haven't experienced, yeah, I don't know. I haven't had a lot of experiences that make me feel like because I'm like a woman or because I'm young, I like am not going to have the support that I need, or people aren't going to take me seriously.
Which is
And I
great.
honestly think like a lot of that comes from men. Yeah, it's awesome. I'm really excited
Yeah.
about that. And I've actually seen a lot of men who are probably in their 50s who are, dads, are the ones who are probably the most supportive.
Hmm.
And um I asked them, I'll talk to them about their families and stuff like that. And, a lot of them have daughters, and they
Yep.
want them to be able to do, like
Anything.
start a business if they want to in the future. And, yeah. So I've noticed a lot of support from people like that. And also a lot of women, like Cody First is from North Dakota,
Yep.
and she runs an amazing fund here. And even yesterday, she came up to me right away, like, "Oh my gosh, Brigit, like, I want you to meet this person. I want you to meet this person. Like, please meet this person." So she really cares too about seeing women in business like succeed, and she cares a lot about that topic, and is really willing to like go out of her way to make sure that I have the connections I need. So don't
I
know if
think
that totally answers your question. I don't know if I totally have an answer to that question, but those are just some of the experiences I've had.
Yeah, I think so. I appreciate the honesty in the answer. I think part of it is too is telling your story, right? I mean, you're doing it today. I think there's lots of
Mhm.
marketing opportunities to continue to do that, and so putting yourself out there as a female entrepreneur that is going through this, even though you don't feel pressure, I think telling the story for other people that basically see that same sort of thing, and basically saying, "Hey, if she can do it, I can do it." My daughter is doing a startup right now, so I'm that 50-year-old dad that's has a daughter that's
Awesome.
going through this process, and so I think a lot of it is modeling, right, where they see other people doing it, and so they say, well, I can do that too. So I do think that this is just continues to move forward in a way, and so it's cool that you don't feel any sort of bias in that. I think the next question is, how do we continue to make sure there's opportunities and mentor networks that basically can leverage that? There's investment opportunities. I think the it's getting better, but I like worked in a large corporation, and I look at like even my senior exec team, and we probably had out of 12, we probably had 2 women that were at that level, and we really tried hard to develop talent to help diversify, and it just takes time, and there's a
Mhm.
lot of just inherent biases, I think, in our industry that we have to continue to knock down. So I appreciate the honest answer, and I think it's a work in progress, but it's cool
Yeah.
that you're in a great spot and you feel like you're valued and moving forward. Cool. So kind of maybe switching maybe towards the end of this is, if you had to go back to yourself that was in college when you first started this, what are 2 or 3 just kind of things that you would tell yourself of just like like insightful items that basically first-time entrepreneurs or like starting this journey, you've come a long way from kind of concept to excitement to like business plan competitions to raising a little bit of capital, getting your product ready to go, and then having a little bit of taste of success. Like you learned so many things there. If you could go back and tell yourself that, when you were a sophomore or junior, what would you tell yourself?
Ooh, that's a great question, Todd. I was reflecting about this on the drive home yesterday, so I'll share this one. But I used to think when we started, and actually I think I thought this for maybe half of the way through building that just because it was hard and because we were facing all these problems, it was maybe this sign or like this indication that we were maybe too far in over our heads, or it wasn't going to work out. Like problem after problem would arise, and it's like, how are we going to solve this? Oh my gosh, we just had a big problem yesterday. Like, why do these problems keep adding up? Like, what are we doing wrong? And I think I thought it was supposed to be kind of smooth sailing. Like, you're doing something right, it gets easier. I don't know. I had that idea for a very long time, and I heard Mark or Zuckerberg say this. He said, every morning I get up and I feel like I'm getting punched in the gut. Like it's problem after problem. All I do every day is solve these problems. And, I come from a family business and I know that they literally have problems every day
Every
that they're
day.
trying to solve. And I don't know. I just think that business is problem solving.
Yeah.
You're solving problems not only for customers, but you're also managing huge teams of people with so many external factors. Like there should be problems, I think. And
Yeah.
I think I used to take them really personally and think I'm doing something wrong. Why are all these problems always happening? But like you can't do that. It's just like, oh, here's a problem. Let's find a solution. Oh, here's a problem. Let's find a solution. It's problem solving, and that's just the name of the game. And I think the moment you get to a point where you're not having to solve problems, you might not be doing enough like customer research to try and find new problems that your business can solve.
Hmm.
Trying to offer new solutions. Maybe you're not being innovative enough. So I don't know. I more recently have really come to the realization that I don't think problems are a bad thing. I don't think you should be afraid of them. I think you should try and fix them as soon as they arise because they can turn into big problems, and those
Yep.
are really not fun. Um, but yeah, I'm not as afraid of when they happen. I think that's just like that's just part of the game that we're
The
playing.
journey. Yep, I agree. And I think that's a good one. I think
Yeah.
you look at, you're trying to do something that's different than what other people have done. If it was easy, everybody would have done it already before. So the ability to kind of continue
Exactly.
to problem solve, I think is like a critical one. And you're going to do it for the entire time you have your business. There's no question about it. And so the
Hmm.
challenges and the teams and the
Hmm.
context will all be different, but you will continue to do this for a long time. So that's a good insight. Just kind of closing out, is there anything else you would think that you'd like to share that we didn't cover today?
Even in terms of like the things maybe I wish I would have known. I remember someone telling us in this accelerator back when we were doing Whole Prize at the beginning, we were talking about this idea, and this this mentor said, "Do you guys know how hard this is going to be? Do you have any idea what you're trying to do and how hard it's going to be to actually succeed?" And the three of us, like Ashlyn, Peyton, and I, kind of looked at each other thinking, like, what is this guy saying? Like, is he trying to be discouraging, or like, what's going on here? Like, do we know how hard this is going to be? Like, yeah, we know how hard this is going to be. I think that was our response. Like, yeah, we're not afraid. Like, we're going to do it, which is so funny. We had absolutely no idea, not even a fraction of the idea of how hard it was going to be. But um, I I'm a big proponent of like being okay with things being hard.
Hmm.
The three of us were all, Division I athletes. Peyton was a triathlete. I mean, she's willing to just absolutely suffer. Like Ashlyn and I were runners,
Yeah.
but Peyton would just suffer and suffer and suffer because of the sport. Like you're inflicting that on your own because you have certain goals you want to try and achieve. Um, Ashlyn and I would be on these gravel roads for hours together, on hot days. You're just grinding, and it's hard, but you're doing it. And you get
Yeah.
to the end, and you just think, huh, okay, I'm going to rest, recover, and I'm going to do it again tomorrow because that's how you improve. And I don't know. I think I would have liked to go back and just tell myself, like, yeah, it's going to be really hard. And I think that's great. Like, you're going to learn so much. You're going to grow so much. Like, you're going to experience some amazing things. And I don't think it's ever going to stop being hard. But you are going to grow. And the things that once you didn't even know if they were going to be attainable, you're going to attain. They're going to be a part of your everyday life, and you're going to forget how hard they once were. So I don't know. I just would say, like, yeah, just because it's hard doesn't mean you can't do it, and doesn't mean you should be afraid of doing it. I think hard things usually indicate that like great rewards are around the corner, whether that be the goal that you think you're shooting for, or some other surprise that becomes of that endeavor. So, yeah, I would have liked to tell myself, like, yeah, it's going to be hard, way harder than you think. Like, you have no idea what you're getting into, but I think you should still go for it and see what happens.
Yeah, you're capable. You're capable of way more than you think, and you'll get
Yeah.
challenged to do it, but you'll do it. Well, Bridget, that's a cool way to end it. I think that's a really good message. And I appreciate you being vulnerable and telling your story and some of the highs and some of the lows. I think it's really, there's a lot of good nuggets in here to take away from it. So I appreciate you taking the time.
Well, thank you for taking the time, Todd, to ask me such great questions. This was so fun.
Okay, well, sounds good.